Hello, family. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the maternity clinic as Mary Daniels sat in the waiting area, hands resting gently on her growing belly. Her eyes flickered to the clock above the reception desk for the fifth time in 10 minutes. The appointment was for 11 a.m., Samuel. He'd promised he'd be there. He'd even sounded eager the night before, asking, "Will they let me hear the heartbeat?" That sliver of warmth had given Mary hope, a fragile thread she clung to through all the tension in their home. But now it was 11:23, and he hadn't shown. Nurses called names that weren't hers, and expectant fathers smiled and held hands with their wives. She sat alone, shifting in the chair as her phone buzzed. Her heart leapt, expecting an apology or an "I'm on my way." But it was a brief, detached message, busy with work. "Can't make it." Mary read it twice, her heart sinking. Not even a sorry, not even a full sentence. The nurse finally called her in, and as she lay on the examination table, watching the flickering image of her child on the monitor, tears quietly streamed down the side of her face. "Is everything okay?" the sonographer asked gently, her eyes kind. Mary forced a smile and nodded, but it wasn't okay. This moment, this miracle, was supposed to be shared. And Samuel hadn't just missed it, he'd dismissed it. On the cab ride home, Mary stared out the window, her fingers tracing the soft outline of her belly under her sweater. "You're not alone," she whispered. "I'm here for you." She arrived home to silence, no flowers, no note, no husband. She dropped the appointment printout on the coffee table and sank into the couch numb. Something inside her was shifting, an ache, a realization, a quiet crack forming where trust used to live. She didn't know it yet, but this was the moment her journey would begin, not just as a mother, but as a woman who would rise. Mary lit the final candle on the dinner table, adjusting the position of the cutlery for the third time. The roasted chicken, his favorite, had gone cold. She'd prepared it all by hand despite her aching back and swollen feet. She even wore the navy blue dress Samuel once said made her look like springtime. But when the door finally creaked open just past 10 p.m., it wasn't gratitude on his face. It was irritation. He didn't acknowledge the food or the effort. His shirt was unbuttoned halfway, the scent of a woman's perfume clinging to him like a shadow. "You cooked?" he asked dully, tossing his briefcase on the couch. "I already ate with some clients." Mary stood in stunned silence, her hand resting protectively over her belly. "Clients?" she asked quietly. He reached for a bottle of water and avoided her gaze. "Yeah, meetings ran long." His tone made it clear she shouldn't press further. Mary gathered the dishes silently. As she scraped untouched food into the bin, she felt the weight of a life shifting beneath her ribs. Not just the baby, but her entire world cracking. "Samuel," she began hesitantly, standing at the kitchen doorway. "Is there someone else?" He scoffed, not even looking up from his phone. "You're being paranoid again. Must be the hormones." Her lips parted, the words caught behind pain. "I'm just asking for honesty." He finally looked up, his expression cold and unbothered. "You're asking to start a fight. Why do you always need something to complain about?" She stared at him, realizing this wasn't miscommunication, it was dismissal. She wasn't being heard. She wasn't being seen. As Samuel walked off toward the bedroom, she remained in the kitchen alone, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound left in the silence. That night, she ate a few spoonfuls of cold rice and fell asleep curled on the couch, one hand beneath her head and the other cradling her unborn son, murmuring, "We'll be okay. Somehow." The sky was overcast as Mary walked along the high street, hoping fresh air would clear the tension clouding her mind. Gabriel had been kicking a lot more lately. It was both a comfort and a constant reminder that she wasn't alone. She passed by a well-known cafe nestled between a boutique and a florist. It wasn't until she heard Samuel's laughter that she turned her head. Inside, near the window, he sat across from a woman with fiery red braids and a bright yellow blazer. She was laughing too, head tilted just slightly, a hand on Samuel's arm. It was the intimacy of the gesture that froze Mary's feet to the pavement. They weren't just colleagues. No one touches their coworker like that. Her stomach churned, not just from nausea, but from the humiliation. She didn't walk in. She didn't confront. She simply stood there, hand trembling slightly against the glass of the window display. The woman leaned in, whispered something that made Samuel smile wider than he had in months. Mary recognized the look on his face. It was the one he used to give her when they'd dance in their tiny apartment kitchen, barefoot and in love. A pain deeper than heartbreak bloomed in her chest. She placed her hand over her belly and slowly turned away. The world didn't stop. Cars passed. Strangers walked by. But inside her, something broke and hardened all at once. She didn't cry, not yet. She walked home like a ghost moving through fog, numb and silent. That night, while folding baby clothes alone, she Googled the woman. Rose Adebayo, PR strategist, high profile, known for reviving damaged brands. Mary stared at her glowing LinkedIn photo for a long time. "She's not even subtle," she muttered, and then she felt Gabriel kick again. "We're not going to disappear," she whispered, rubbing her belly. "No matter what they think." Isabel poured chamomile tea into 2 mismatched mugs and slid one across the table toward Mary. "So you saw her?" she asked gently. Mary nodded without meeting her friend's eyes, staring instead at the steam curling from her cup. And he looked happy. The 2 women sat in Isabel's small kitchen, tucked away behind a row of palm trees and potted herbs. "I didn't make a scene," Mary murmured. "I just watched them. I thought I'd scream. Or maybe faint, but I just froze." Isabel reached across the table, laying her hand over Mary's. "You don't have to do this alone, you know. We'll figure something out." Mary blinked, eyes finally meeting her friend's. "I keep thinking, maybe it's just a phase. Maybe when the baby comes, things will change." Isabel sighed. "Maybe, but even if they don't, you deserve better than to be treated like furniture in your own life." The silence settled again, heavy and honest. "I don't want my son to grow up watching me be invisible," Mary said finally. "But I don't know where to start. I've built everything around Samuel for so long." Isabel gave her a soft smile. "Start with yourself. Start with small things. Read again. Write again. Dream again." Mary gave a tired chuckle. "You make it sound poetic." Isabel leaned back in her chair. "It's not poetic, it's survival." The weight of her words sat with Mary long after she left Isabel's house. That night, she found her old journal tucked away in a drawer. She hadn't written in it since before the wedding. Flipping to a blank page, she held her pen for a long time before writing. "He's breaking my heart, and I'm pretending not to notice. But I notice. God help me, I notice." Mary wandered aimlessly through the park, trying to hush the internal noise that had become her constant companion. The air was crisp, and the rustle of dry leaves beneath her sandals echoed louder than it should have. Her belly ached slightly from the walk. But it was the ache in her chest that made her stop at the edge of the fountain. A man nearby was helping an elderly woman retrieve her cane from a bench. His suit was clean but not flashy, and he moved with an air of calm competence. As Mary turned to leave, her balance tipped just slightly, but enough to make her stumble. "Are you all right?" the man asked, stepping toward her. "Yes," she murmured, embarrassed. "Just clumsy these days." He smiled kindly, noting her pregnancy. "Nothing clumsy about carrying life," he said. "I'm Daniel. I run a tech firm nearby. You look like you could use a place to sit." She managed a small smile. "Mary." Daniel gestured toward a bench, and they sat. They spoke lightly, about the weather, about the park's serenity, and then the conversation shifted. "You've got a calm presence," he observed. "Have you ever done consulting or creative strategy?" "You seem thoughtful." Mary blinked. "I used to write campaigns, marketing pieces. A long time ago." Daniel pulled a card from his wallet. "Ascension Apps, founder and CEO. We're expanding," he said. "If you're ever ready." She hesitated before accepting it. The idea of working again seemed both foreign and thrilling. "I'm not sure what I'm ready for," she admitted. Daniel stood. "That's all right. Readiness has more to do with decision than circumstance." Mary watched him walk away, the card resting in her palm like an unopened door. When she got home, she tucked it inside the front pocket of her journal without telling Samuel. She didn't know it yet, but she had just shaken hands with her future. The evening buzzed with clinking glasses and forced laughter at the upscale lounge where Samuel's firm hosted their quarterly dinner. Mary arrived in a simple but elegant emerald dress, hoping to remind him of who she was, who they used to be. But Samuel hadn't even noticed her entrance. He was already mid-conversation with two executives, and seated beside him was Rose, clad in a scarlet dress that left little to the imagination. Mary sat beside Samuel and tried to smile through the awkwardness, offering quiet hellos and sipping water while everyone else indulged in champagne. During the group toast, Samuel suddenly cleared his throat. And lastly, to my lovely wife who's taken a break from her. Let's call it domestic retreat, but insists she'll be a career woman again someday. The room chuckled. Mary's face flushed with heat as he continued. I told her we'll make space for her resume between diaper changes. Rose laughed the loudest. Mary clenched her glass tightly, the sting of humiliation sharper than anything she'd expected. But instead of retaliating, she leaned over and whispered in Samuel's ear, her voice even and low. Every joke has its expiration date. So does every marriage. He looked startled, but recovered quickly, forcing a chuckle and brushing her off with a wave. The rest of the evening was a blur. Mary nodded through conversations, but her mind was somewhere else, already forming cracks that let light through. On the ride home, Samuel yawned and said, "Try not to be so sensitive next time." It was just a joke. Mary didn't respond. In the mirror, she caught Rose's reflection from the back seat, smiling smugly as she scrolled through her phone. Mary turned to the window and pressed a hand to her belly. They won't laugh forever, she thought. And in that quiet fury, something powerful began to grow inside her, something beyond anger. Resolve. Mary closed the bedroom door gently behind her, the silence pressing in on all sides. Samuel had tossed his jacket on a chair and disappeared into the guest room without a word. She stood in their once shared space, now cold and hollow, and took in the walls they had painted together, the curtains she'd sewn by hand, the baby crib still unassembled in the corner. She sat on the edge of the bed and slowly removed her earrings, each gesture mechanical. The ache in her back pulsed in rhythm with the heartbreak in her chest. A tiny photo strip from their first anniversary fell out from a drawer as she looked for a fresh nightgown. In the pictures, they were laughing, Samuel's arms wrapped tightly around her shoulders. "Where did you go?" she whispered into the room. "And why didn't you take me with you?" Her voice cracked and the tears came, silent at first, then gasping. She curled under the blanket, shivering despite the warmth, her hand resting on her stomach, as if drawing strength from Gabriel's soft movements. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her unborn child. "I should have left the first time he made me feel small." Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a message from Isabel. "Still here if you need me. Don't let his coldness make you doubt your warmth." Mary stared at the screen, then turned it over and let it fall to the floor. Her tears were not the loud movie-like sobs. They were steady, real, and weary, like rain soaking earth. By morning, her pillow was damp, her heart bruised, but her spine just a little straighter. Pain had stripped her down to something raw, but also something unbreakable. She didn't have answers yet, but she had a question forming, and it echoed through her soul. Who do I want to become for me? The bookstore smelled of dust and paper and long-forgotten dreams, exactly the kind of place Mary hadn't entered in months. She didn't intend to buy anything. She just wanted a place to breathe, to be anonymous. Her fingers grazed the spine of a poetry anthology when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "We meet again," Daniel said softly. He was holding a thick hardcover on innovation in business leadership, but his smile was anything but corporate. "Mary, right?" She turned, surprised, nodding shyly. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and she wore no makeup, yet Daniel didn't seem to notice anything except her eyes. "You still have my card?" he asked. Mary hesitated, then pulled it from her wallet. "I didn't forget," Daniel smiled. "You don't look like someone who forgets easily." She allowed herself a small laugh, the first real one in weeks. They talked for almost half an hour in the aisle, surrounded by silent stories and unwritten beginnings. Daniel didn't pry into her life. He asked questions that made her feel like more than her pain. "What kind of writing did you used to do?" "Marketing mostly. Campaign strategies. I loved connecting words to meaning." His face lit up. "That's exactly what we do at Ascension, connect people to purpose." When she looked uncertain, he added, It's not a job pitch. It's an invitation. You can come by just to see what we're building. No pressure. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. A message from Samuel. Don't forget to pick up the dry cleaning. No greeting, no check-in. She silenced it and met Daniel's gaze. Okay, she said, I'll stop by. He didn't respond with enthusiasm, just a nod of understanding. We could use someone with your mind. And maybe you could use a place that reminds you how strong it is. Mary sat at her kitchen table with a steaming cup of ginger tea and her laptop open for the first time in months. Her resume stared back at her, outdated and skeletal. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Where do I even begin? Isabel, who was folding baby clothes in the corner, smiled knowingly. Begin where it hurts, she said. Then add everything you survived. That's the real experience. They spent hours refining bullet points, updating job descriptions, and crafting a cover letter that felt like truth without sounding like desperation. As Mary typed, something flickered inside her, a strange mixture of anxiety and pride. She wasn't sure what scared her more, failing or succeeding. What if I'm not good enough anymore? She asked softly. Isabel didn't flinch. Mary, you are so much more than enough. You're becoming. 2 days later, Mary stood outside Ascension Apps, her resume printed and tucked into a slim file. Her hands trembled slightly as she stepped inside the sunlit lobby. It was modern, bright, filled with plants and soft jazz playing overhead, nothing like the cold corporate offices Samuel often dragged her to. Daniel greeted her personally, dressed in a smart gray blazer. You showed up, he said warmly. Most people don't realize showing up is the hardest part. The interview felt less like an interrogation and more like a conversation. Mary spoke with clarity, her voice growing steadier as the minutes passed. Why did you take a break from work? The HR manager asked gently. Mary answered without hesitation. Life asked me to pause, but I've been listening, and I'm ready to speak again. After a few silent beats, Daniel said, We'd like to start you part-time, consultant level. Work from home. We'll see how it goes. When Mary stepped outside, the sun was blinding. But for the first time in months, she didn't flinch. The grand hall shimmered under crystal chandeliers, filled with clinking glasses and the perfume of pretense. Samuel's firm was throwing a client appreciation gala, and Mary had received a last-minute invite, more out of obligation than courtesy. She wore a deep, wine-colored gown that hugged her bump elegantly, and for once, she didn't care whether Samuel noticed. She had walked in not to be seen, but to see. Across the room, Rose glided through conversations like a politician, her laughter just loud enough to command attention. When their eyes met, Rose's smile widened. Mary, she said as they met near the Hors d'oeuvres table. Didn't think you'd show up. Still holding on, I see. Mary raised a brow, her voice even. Didn't think you'd be so invested in what I'm holding. Rose leaned in slightly, her lips painted the color of threat. You'll be gone soon. He's already planning the next chapter. Just thought you should know. Mary didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly picked up a canapé, her eyes never leaving Rose's. Funny, she said. I'm writing my own chapter now, and you're not in it. With that, she turned and walked away, not because she was trying to win, but because she no longer needed to compete. Across the room, Samuel barely looked up from his conversation. But Mary didn't mind. She stepped out onto the balcony, the cool air washing over her. The city skyline stretched wide and glowing like possibility. She placed her hands on her belly and whispered, We're not waiting for him anymore. The strength she felt wasn't loud. It was quiet and unshakable, the kind that builds cathedrals out of broken bricks. It started with a sharp pain in the lower abdomen, sudden and unforgiving. Mary had been working on a content brief for Daniel's team when she felt the chair beneath her go damp. Panic swelled in her throat. She was only 33 weeks. No, not yet. Please, not yet, she whispered, clutching the edge of the desk. Isabel rushed her to the hospital, barely catching her breath as they wheeled Mary into labor and delivery. The room was sterile and urgent, nurses moving with purpose, doctors speaking in clipped tones. You're going into preterm labor, the obstetrician said. We need to act quickly. Mary nodded through tears, her body trembling. She clutched Isabel's hand as the contractions built in intensity. Just keep him safe, she pleaded. Just keep my baby safe. Her voice cracked with both fear and strength. Her body may have been weakening, but her resolve was a steel wall. Hours later, through sweat and agony, Gabriel entered the world with a fragile cry, small, wrinkled, but breathing. Mary sobbed the moment she heard him, reaching with trembling hands toward the incubator where the nurses worked quickly. They assured her he was stable, but would need support in the NICU. When Samuel finally arrived, nearly 3 hours after the birth, he entered the room scrolling on his phone. "Why couldn't you wait till full term?" he asked without looking at her. Mary blinked, stunned. "What?" she whispered, disbelieving. "I mean," he said, sighing, "preemies are always extra work." "You couldn't take it easy like the doctor said?" Isabel, seated by the window, rose immediately. "That's enough." But Mary raised her hand to stop her. "Let him talk," she said, her eyes fixed on Samuel. "Let me remember every word." As he mumbled about traffic and schedules, Mary stared at her wristband, reminding herself of the little boy whose life had just begun. "He won't grow up like this," she murmured beneath her breath. "He won't learn to love like this." The hospital lights never dimmed. Between feedings, pumping schedules, and visits to the NICU, Mary drifted through days like a ghost tethered to the rhythm of monitors and IV drips. Her body felt foreign, soft in the wrong places, stitched and bruised. She winced every time she moved, but what hurt more than her physical wounds was the isolation. Samuel didn't stay the night. He'd show up briefly in the afternoons, say a few empty words about meetings, then leave before sunset. Nurses often mistook Isabel for her spouse, and Mary didn't correct them. At night, when the corridors fell silent, she cried into the pillow, her body curled around the weight of invisible fears. Would Gabriel thrive? Would she be enough? Would Samuel ever change? The questions clung to her like sweat. Each morning, she woke up grateful her son was still breathing and dreading everything else. One afternoon, a nurse brought in a small bouquet of sunflowers and a card. Mary frowned. She hadn't told anyone about her room. "From Daniel Roberts," the nurse said with a smile. "You must be someone special." Mary opened the card. "Even the sun makes room for those who bloom early. Congratulations, Daniel." She stared at the message, her throat tightening. He didn't know everything, but he had acknowledged her without judgment, without pretense. The following day, a care package arrived, soothing tea, a notebook, lip balm, and a handwritten note from Isabel. "You're doing better than you think." Mary placed both cards on the nightstand and exhaled. These gestures weren't grand, but they reached a part of her soul that Samuel had long stopped trying to find. Later that night, as she sat beside Gabriel's incubator and traced a finger along the edge, she whispered, "You'll never have to wonder if you're enough. Not with me, I promise you that." 2 weeks after bringing Gabriel home, Mary stood by the window of her apartment, rocking him gently as soft jazz played in the background. The peace was short-lived. A knock interrupted the melody. When she opened the door, a man in a charcoal suit handed her a thick envelope. "From Mr. Samuel Daniels," he said. Her hands trembled as she opened the legal document, preliminary filings for custody review. At the bottom was a signed declaration. "The mother has shown signs of emotional instability, which may compromise the child's welfare." Her breath caught. "Emotional instability," she whispered. Isabel, seated on the couch, shot to her feet. "He's trying to paint you unfit. After everything?" Mary swallowed her fear and nodded slowly. "He's not fighting for Gabriel. He's fighting for control." That night, she barely slept. Instead, she stayed up researching lawyers with Isabel and making notes while Gabriel slept peacefully beside her. By morning, she had an appointment with a top-rated family attorney, Rebecca Iodell. Tall, confident, with deep brown eyes that didn't flinch, Rebecca studied Mary's file and listened carefully. "He's playing a cruel game," she said, tapping the papers. "But I've seen worse, and I've won." Mary let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "I'm scared," she admitted, "but I'm more tired of being small." Rebecca nodded. "Then let's stop shrinking." They began building a case rooted in truth, timelines, and documented neglect. Every time Mary doubted herself, Rebecca reminded her, "You're not asking for sympathy. You're standing for your child's peace." As they left the law office, Mary turned to Isabel. "He used to love me," she said softly. Isabel looped her arm through hers. Then let him try to destroy what he once loved. You'll survive it. And so will Gabriel. The glass doors of Ascension apps whooshed open with a sound that echoed possibility. Mary stepped inside with Gabriel strapped to her chest, swaddled and asleep. The reception area glowed with warm lighting and soft background music, a stark contrast to the tension and coldness that had defined her home life for so long. Daniel approached her, surprised to see the baby in tow, but not inconvenienced. "He's the youngest strategist we've ever had in the building," he joked gently. Mary smiled, adjusting the carrier. He refused to be left behind. I guess ambition runs in the family. They moved into a private conference room where Mary would begin her onboarding as a part-time consultant. Her workspace was remote, but Daniel insisted on giving her a real welcome. "I'm not here to save you," he said seriously. "I'm here to work with you. That's what we do here, we rise together." Something in his tone made her believe him. Over the next few weeks, Mary blossomed in the role. Each day she crafted strategic content, pitched campaigns, and collaborated with design leads virtually while nursing Gabriel in between. Her ideas were crisp, bold, and rooted in empathy, qualities the company hadn't realized it needed. One afternoon, Daniel messaged her after reviewing a pitch deck she created. "This is brilliant. You made people care. That's what good branding does." She sat in silence after reading it, her eyes stinging, not because of exhaustion, but because someone finally saw her value again. She no longer felt invisible. As her confidence grew, so did her clarity. She was no longer functioning for survival. She was beginning to build. She didn't tell Samuel about her job. She didn't feel the need to. Ascension wasn't just a workplace. It was a mirror reflecting the woman she was becoming. Capable, needed, and rising. The apartment Mary found was modest but bright, nestled on the third floor of a quiet block, surrounded by flowering shrubs and the faint scent of roasted corn from the street vendor nearby. With Isabel's help, she moved in over a single weekend, packing her few belongings and carefully wrapping each of Gabriel's items as though they were glass. The hardest part wasn't the physical move. It was the silence when she told Samuel. "You're doing what?" he asked, his voice more amused than shocked. "You think you can handle living alone? You can't even handle a full night's sleep." Mary didn't argue. She just looked at him, calmly and steadily. "This isn't about what you think I can do. It's about what I need to do." Samuel scoffed, pulling on his tie. "Go ahead then. Let's see how long this fantasy lasts." But even his words couldn't follow her past the threshold of her new home. That night, Mary stood in the kitchen, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, humming to herself as she rocked Gabriel to sleep. The air smelled of fresh paint and lavender from a candle Isabel gifted her. It was the first time in months she didn't feel watched, judged, or dismissed. She laid Gabriel down in his bassinet and sat on the balcony with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The stars were faint, but visible. She exhaled, not a sigh of exhaustion, but one of release. Her laptop pinged, a message from Daniel. "Just wanted to say your last project increased traffic by 28%. People are taking notice." She smiled, typing back, "Thank you. I almost forgot what it felt like to matter." And as the wind brushed her skin, Mary knew she hadn't escaped her old life. She had simply stepped beyond its borders. Every creak in that small apartment, every squeak of Gabriel's bassinet, sounded like freedom. The manila envelope was heavy with tension as Mary pulled it from her mailbox. The return address read Daniels & Cole, LLP. Her fingers tightened as she slid the documents out, legal filings from Samuel's attorneys, formally contesting custody of Gabriel. The words were cold and clinical. Motion to establish paternal primary custody based on maternal instability postpartum. Her knees buckled for a moment, and she leaned against the wall. Inside, Gabriel giggled from his playmat, oblivious to the war forming around him. Mary placed the papers on the table, her hands shaking, not from fear, but from fury. Samuel was trying to weaponize her vulnerability. He wasn't trying to raise their child, he was trying to erase her role in it. She called Rebecca immediately. "He filed?" the attorney asked, her voice sharp. "Yes, and he's using postpartum as a strategy." Rebecca's voice cooled. "Then we'll make the truth louder than his lies." Over the following days, Mary and Rebecca prepared every detail, medical records, therapist notes, even Isabel's sworn affidavit about the support system Mary built around Gabriel. They documented the sleepless nights, the doctor visits Mary never missed, the early developmental signs that proved Gabriel was thriving. "We're not fighting for revenge," Rebecca reminded her. "We're fighting for stability, for truth." Daniel, when informed, offered character references and gently asked if she needed flexibility at work. "Your family comes first," he said. "We'll cover you however we can." The support staggered Mary. It reminded her that she was no longer alone in this storm. One night, after Gabriel had drifted off, Mary stared at the custody papers again. She took a black pen and scrawled across the margin, "I am not unstable. I am unstoppable." And for the first time since her son was born, she believed it. The office was mostly empty when Mary stopped by one evening to pick up her laptop. Daniel was in his glass-walled corner, sleeves rolled to his elbows, reading through performance analytics. He looked up and smiled. "Burning the midnight oil too?" Mary chuckled softly. "Just grabbing a few things. Gabriel's teething. He sleeps in bursts, and so do I." Daniel leaned back, studying her face. "You've changed," he said. "When I met you, you carried your silence like a second skin. Now you fill the room, even when you say nothing." She blinked at the words, unsure how to respond. There was no flirtation in his voice, just recognition. He stood and motioned toward the quiet rooftop balcony. "Do you have 5 minutes?" She hesitated, then nodded. Up there, the city lights painted the night sky in golds and grays. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said, leaning against the rail. "Why him? What made you choose Samuel?" Mary let out a long breath, folding her arms. "He wasn't always like this. In the beginning, he believed in me. He read every blog post I wrote, brought me tea during deadlines, and called me his future." She looked up, but then life got loud, and he stopped listening. Daniel nodded slowly. "I know that story. My ex-wife left after I lost everything in a failed investment. She didn't sign up for struggle. I didn't blame her, not really, but I promised myself I'd never let someone feel small again under my roof." They stood in silence until Mary said, "I'm not looking to be rescued." Daniel's voice was quiet. "And I'm not offering that. Just a friendship where no one has to pretend." She looked at him, really looked, and saw not a man trying to fix her, but one who respected the work she was already doing to fix herself. "Then let's just be two honest people, trying not to fall apart," she whispered. He smiled. "Deal." The courtroom was chilled by more than air conditioning. It hummed with tension, each side seated with their respective attorneys. Each word passed between them like a chess move in a game where the stakes were flesh and blood. Mary sat straight, her black suit crisp, her fingers entwined in her lap as Rebecca rose to deliver their opening remarks. On the opposite side, Samuel leaned back confidently, a smug expression plastered across his face, and beside him sat a lawyer more performance artist than legal mind. He painted Mary as emotionally erratic, implying that her pursuit of a career made her incapable of primary motherhood. "The child requires stability," he declared. "Not a woman juggling startup stress with diaper changes." The words stung, but Mary did not flinch. Rebecca stood and said, "We'll let the evidence speak, and the child's well-being will speak loudest." As the hearing progressed, documents were reviewed, witnesses called. Isabel testified with grace and clarity. She never once left that baby in need. Not one bottle late, not one cry unanswered. Pediatric records showed Gabriel thriving. Photos of Mary, working while cradling her son, real, candid, human, were presented. Then it was Mary's turn. She walked to the stand with measured steps. "I am a mother. I am a provider. And yes, I run a business. But what I do isn't distraction. It's dedication. It's a legacy I'm building for him." The judge nodded, pen moving slowly across his notepad. Samuel scowled, arms crossed, but said nothing. During recess, he passed Mary in the hallway and muttered, "You've made this ugly." She turned to him, calm as stone. "No, Samuel, you brought ugliness. I just stopped covering it with silence." And with that, she walked away, each step echoing her new identity. Rebecca had debated whether to use it. The video was damning, yes, but it was also deeply personal. Mary had hesitated when she first saw the clip, sent anonymously from a former employee of Samuel's firm. It showed the night of the gala. Samuel laughing as he mimicked Mary's morning sickness in front of his colleagues, while Rose clinked her glass and added, "Well, she can't keep anything down, including his attention." The crowd had laughed. It wasn't just mean, it was dehumanizing. When the judge allowed it into evidence, the room fell into absolute silence as the clip played. Mary kept her eyes fixed ahead, refusing to watch herself be mocked on screen. Samuel shifted in his seat, visibly uncomfortable, and Rose, seated a few rows back, ducked her head. When the footage ended, the judge looked up slowly, his face unreadable. "Was this meant to be humor?" he asked. Samuel's lawyer fumbled. "It was taken out of context." Rebecca stood immediately. "Context doesn't change intent. That is the child's father. And that is the reality Mary has endured." The judge nodded, writing something deliberately. Mary finally turned her head and met Samuel's eyes. For the first time in a long time, he looked unsure. The court recessed early that day. Outside, reporters swarmed the exit, hungry for sound bites, but Mary said nothing. Daniel met her near the parking lot, handing her a flask of warm tea. "You did what most people wouldn't. You stood your ground in the fire." She took a sip, her hands still trembling. "It hurts more than I thought it would," she admitted. "But I think that means I'm healing." He smiled. "Or that you're human. Healing comes next." She glanced at the courthouse behind her, its towering structure once so intimidating. "Let them see everything," she said softly, "because I have nothing left to hide." Court resumed with a quiet tension as Rebecca approached the bench with a final piece of documentation. "Your Honor," she said clearly, "the defense has painted my client as overwhelmed, incapable, and emotionally compromised. We'd like to introduce Exhibit D." She handed over a neatly compiled file. The judge adjusted his glasses as he flipped through the contents. "Mary Daniels," he read aloud, "Chief Executive Officer of Ascension Apps." Samuel shifted in his seat, visibly startled. This can't be current," his lawyer murmured. Rebecca responded without missing a beat. "It is. Her leadership has resulted in a 40% revenue increase in just 6 months. She is not unstable, she is exceptional." The judge glanced up at Mary. "While raising a premature infant?" he asked. Mary nodded, her voice steady. "Yes, Your Honor. And I didn't do it alone, but I did it well." The silence in the courtroom was electric. Samuel's mouth twitched, but no words came. The judge cleared his throat and set the document down. "I commend your commitment, Ms. Daniels, not only to your child, but to rebuilding yourself under pressure." He turned to Samuel. "It takes a certain kind of man to try and strip custody from a mother with such dedication, and it's not the kind this court favors." Rose, sitting at the back, looked down at her phone, suddenly disinterested in the outcome. Mary stared straight ahead, her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. She wasn't just defending herself anymore, she was defining herself. Later that evening, Rebecca turned to her on the courthouse steps. Today wasn't just a win, it was a reintroduction. Mary smiled faintly. "I don't think I want to go back to who I was before." Rebecca grinned. "You won't. That woman was beautiful. But this one commands the room." The final hearing began with none of the drama that had marked the earlier sessions. The air was almost reverent, as if everyone sensed what was about to shift. The judge, calm but firm, reviewed the last of the files, his pen making soft strokes as he flipped pages. "After reviewing all documentation and testimonies," he said slowly, "this court finds that Mary Daniels is best suited to provide stable, nurturing care for the minor child, Gabriel Daniels. Full custody is awarded to the mother." Samuel sat stone still, as if frozen in disbelief. His lawyer leaned in to whisper something, but he swatted the words away. Rose, conspicuously absent from this final session, left behind only her echo, just as Mary predicted. Mary closed her eyes, gripping the arm of her chair as the reality settled like warm light across her shoulders. She hadn't just survived, she'd prevailed. After the hearing, she met Daniel outside, where he was waiting beside her car. "You did it," he said, his smile soft but proud. "No," Mary replied, pulling Gabriel's car seat gently from the stroller. "We did it. All of us, Rebecca, Isabel, even you. But most of all, this little guy." Daniel peeked in at Gabriel, who was napping with his lips puckered slightly. "Looks like he's already dreaming bigger." As she secured the seatbelt, Samuel appeared across the lot. Their eyes met. He took a few steps forward but stopped short, unsure, deflated. "He doesn't even look like me anymore," he said under his breath. Mary, calm and centered, responded, "That's because he's not growing in your shadow anymore." She turned and got into the car. As they pulled away, Samuel remained there, alone, still, watching the woman he once underestimated drive off with everything that truly mattered. Back in her apartment, Mary placed the final framed court order into a drawer and locked it away, not out of secrecy, but out of closure. Gabriel was on the floor, surrounded by plush toys and cooing at the ceiling fan as if it were the most fascinating invention in the world. Isabel arrived minutes later with a small cake that read, "Victory isn't loud. It's lived." Mary laughed as she opened the box. "You always know what to say," she said, pulling her friend into a hug. "I just translate what you already know," Isabel replied, winking. They sat on the rug, Gabriel between them, babbling happily as the late afternoon light poured in. There were no headlines, no cameras, no applause, just peace. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Later that evening, Mary received a package at the door. No return label, just a cream envelope tucked beneath the ribbon. Inside was a soft teddy bear with a golden ribbon tied in a bow and a handwritten card. For Gabriel, whose mother redefined what strength looks like, Daniel. Her breath caught for a moment, not from the gesture alone, but from what it represented. Acknowledgement without expectation. She placed the bear beside Gabriel, who reached for it immediately. As he curled beside it and drifted to sleep, Mary stood by the window, arms folded. The city beyond was the same, but everything inside her had changed. She whispered, "We did it, baby. We really did." And in the quiet hum of her home, her victory echoed, not in thunder, but in the steady rhythm of peace. The Ascension app's office buzzed with excitement on the morning of the article's release. A well-known digital magazine had profiled Mary Daniels in a piece titled "Mother, Visionary, CEO." Her portrait filled the cover, a candid image of her standing by a whiteboard, Gabriel cradled in one arm while she pointed to a marketing plan with the other. The interview quoted her, "I didn't bounce back, I climbed, brick by brick." Mary read the article alone in her apartment, the words hitting harder than she expected. It wasn't vanity that made her emotional, it was validation. Everything she'd endured was now reframed as strength. Her phone buzzed with congratulations from colleagues, clients, even a few cautious industry insiders who'd once ignored her emails. When Isabel called, her voice was beaming. "They finally see what I've known all along. You didn't just rise, you rebuilt the floor." That afternoon, Daniel passed her office doorway with a printed copy of the article in hand. "Autograph?" he teased, offering her a pen. She laughed and shook her head. "Only if you hang it next to your degrees." He leaned against the doorframe, eyes soft. "You do realize you're changing the narrative for a lot of women right now, especially mothers." She paused, the weight of his words settling in. "I didn't do it to make a point," she said honestly. "I did it because I had to, for Gabriel. For myself." Daniel nodded. "Sometimes necessity births the loudest revolutions." Across town, Samuel sat alone at a cafe with the article pulled up on his phone. He scrolled through the photos, jaw tight, heart heavy. It wasn't just that she'd become something without him. It was that she'd become better without him. And for the first time, he understood the cost of his arrogance. Mary was sorting through Gabriel's closet, setting aside clothes he had outgrown, when the doorbell rang. She opened it to find Rose standing there, dressed impeccably, lips painted like armor. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Rose exhaled dramatically. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "I came because, well, I guess I need to understand what you did to him." Mary raised a brow. "What I did?" Rose stepped inside without being invited, scanning the apartment. "He's not the same. He's distant, restless, obsessive about the past, about you." Mary folded her arms. "I didn't do anything to him, Rose. He did it to himself. I just finally stepped out of the blast zone." Rose let out a bitter laugh. "So that's it? You win?" Mary walked over to the door and held it open. "This wasn't a competition, but yes, I did." As Rose stood in the doorway, her mask of confidence faltered. "He still talks about you," she admitted. "He still wonders how he let you go." Mary stared back, voice calm. "And what do you wonder, Rose?" There was a beat of silence before Rose replied, "Whether I ever had him in the first place." Mary didn't respond. She didn't need to. The silence between them said more than any insult could. Rose turned and walked away, heels echoing down the hallway like the last remnants of something that never truly belonged. Inside, Gabriel giggled from his high chair, unaware of the war that had just ended without a sound. Mary sat beside him, spoon-feeding pureed mango and smiling to herself. That chapter was closed not with rage, but with resolution. Some victories came with applause. Others, like this one, came with quiet strength and a child's laugh. The apartment was too quiet. Samuel stood at the kitchen counter, swirling a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the dim light of a nearby lamp. He hadn't gone into the office in days. No one asked why, no one noticed. The silence that once felt like freedom now sounded like judgment. He opened the same article on Mary again, reading her quotes like they were personal betrayals. "She wasn't supposed to do all this without me," he muttered. There were no photos of Gabrielle on his walls, no laughter echoing in his home. Just muted television and the low hum of regret. He pulled out his phone and typed, "Can we talk?" But his thumb hovered above the send button. Then he pressed it. 3 words sent into the void. Mary read the message while rocking Gabriel to sleep. Her heart didn't race. It didn't sink. It just paused. She locked her phone without replying. Some doors didn't need slamming. They just needed to remain closed. Samuel waited hours, then days, hoping for a response. Eventually, even hope became exhausting. One night, he sat in the dark and whispered to no one. "I thought I had time." But time, like love, couldn't be abused and still expected to stay. He poured himself another drink and stared at the wall where her photo used to hang. She was gone, not just from his home, but from the version of life he'd built on ego and neglect. And she had taken the light with her. The office had cleared for the day, but the rooftop garden of Ascension Apps buzzed with soft music and the hum of casual conversation. Daniel had invited Mary to the team dinner. Nothing formal, just an evening of laughter and food under string lights and stars. She hesitated at first, but eventually brought Gabriel, now plump and giggling, nestled in a wrap against her chest. The staff greeted her like she was more than their CEO. They saw her as someone who had earned her place through more than just strategy. As the night went on, Mary found herself laughing, truly laughing, for the first time in what felt like years. Someone handed her a glass of non-alcoholic sangria, and she stood near the balcony, watching the city breathe beneath her feet. Daniel approached quietly. "You looked like you were somewhere far away," he said gently. Mary smiled. "Just realizing that peace doesn't feel loud. It feels like this." Gabriel began to stir, his tiny fists batting the air, and Mary instinctively swayed. Without asking, Daniel stepped closer and extended his arms. "May I?" She nodded, watching as he held her son with careful ease. Gabriel's little head nestled against Daniel's shoulder like he'd always known him. "He likes you," she murmured. Daniel chuckled, adjusting the blanket. "He's got good instincts." For several minutes, they didn't speak. No labels. No pressure. Just 2 people standing close under soft lights while a child slept between them. Mary glanced up and whispered, "I never thought I'd feel safe again." Daniel didn't say "you are." He simply held Gabriel a little tighter and stayed beside her, letting her decide the pace of her healing. The awards gala was held at the Civic Center downtown. The hall dressed in elegance with towering floral arrangements and chandeliers glittering like constellations. Mary arrived in a sleek navy gown, her hair pinned in a soft bun, confidence radiating from every step she took. Daniel stood at the foot of the stage, smiling as she passed him. "Go claim what you've earned," he whispered. When her name was called, Entrepreneur of the Year, the applause felt like thunder. She walked to the stage with grace, but her voice wavered slightly as she reached the microphone. "This isn't just for innovation or leadership," she began, scanning the crowd. "This is for every woman who's been told she's too much, or too tired, or too late to begin again." She paused, breath catching slightly. "There was a time I thought my life ended inside a marriage that dimmed me. But sometimes the end is just a rough draft of a better chapter." The audience remained quiet, moved not by grandeur, but by authenticity. "My son taught me that survival isn't enough. We're meant to thrive." She lifted the award slowly. This is for Gabriel, my beginning, my reason. Afterward, guests swarmed her for handshakes and congratulations, but Mary's eyes sought one person. She found Daniel by the refreshment table, holding a glass of water. You spoke for all of us, he said, stepping forward. That you stood for yourself. Mary tucked a curl behind her ear, tears shining in her eyes. It's the first time I've ever felt like a woman and a leader without having to choose between them. Daniel nodded. That's the kind of leader who changes the world. A cream envelope, unmarked and folded neatly, arrived in Mary's mailbox days after the gala. She recognized the handwriting instantly. It was Samuel's. She opened it slowly, sitting at the kitchen table while Gabriel napped in his room. The letter wasn't long, but it carried weight. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to say I'm sorry. For mocking your dreams. For underestimating your strength. I didn't know how to love someone rising when I was falling. I thought control was love. I know better now. Mary read it twice, her hand still. There was no bitterness left in her, only distance. Time had done what anger couldn't. It had softened the edges of grief into quiet acceptance. She folded the letter and placed it in the back of her journal, not for nostalgia, but for remembrance. Later that night, she sat beside Gabriel's crib, brushing his curls with her fingers. Your father made mistakes, she whispered, but his shadow doesn't define you. Or me. She glanced at the framed photo on her shelf, just her and Gabriel on the night of the gala, his tiny hand wrapped around her necklace. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Isabel, dropping by with a late-night snack and warm laughter. You look lighter, she said, placing the food on the table. Mary nodded. Because I've finally let go of what tried to keep me small. She poured them both tea and added softly, I didn't need the apology, but I'm glad I got it. They clinked their mugs together and sat in silence, listening to the gentle rise and fall of Gabriel's breath through the baby monitor, a rhythm that now marked peace instead of survival. The soft hum of laughter and music filled the apartment as close friends gathered to celebrate Gabriel's first birthday. Balloons bobbed against the ceiling, and a small jungle-themed cake sat proudly at the center of the table. Mary wore a flowing cream blouse and wide-legged trousers, her curls pinned to one side. Gabriel, clad in a tiny green shirt that read, One and Wild, giggled as he toddled between legs and arms, practicing his steps. Daniel helped set up the last of the decorations, fastening a paper lion to the wall. This is better than any boardroom, he said, stepping back to admire the scene. Mary smiled. He's the reason I rebuilt. It only feels right that today reflects joy, not just milestones. Isabel raised a toast later that afternoon, her voice warm. To Gabriel, may he grow knowing that he was born into the arms of a fighter, a builder, and a woman who turned pain into a platform. Mary blinked back tears as guests clapped and clinked their glasses. Samuel didn't show, though he had been invited out of courtesy. A gift did arrive, a simple wooden puzzle and a card that read, Happy Birthday. Be better than I was. Mary tucked it into a box labeled things he'll decide about someday. As the day wound down and guests trickled out, Daniel lingered. They stood at the balcony, overlooking the streetlights flickering on one by one. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. Mary took a long breath. Not leaving him, only waiting so long to begin. Daniel nodded, then gently brushed her hand with his. She didn't pull away. Not everything had to be declared. Some connections simply existed. Months later, the sun poured through the wide windows of Mary's new home, a modest, two-story house with an herb garden in the backyard and a brass knocker shaped like a tree on the door. Gabriel's laughter echoed from the living room, where blocks tumbled and cartoons flickered. Mary sat in her home office, finalizing a funding pitch for a tech education program for mothers, her latest initiative through Ascension apps. She signed the final page, then paused to look at the plaque on her wall. It read, Mary Daniels, Mother, Leader, Visionary. She hadn't ordered it. It had arrived anonymously months ago, but she kept it because it reminded her who she chose to become. Later, as the evening wind drifted through sheer curtains, Mary walked barefoot through the house, humming softly. She paused at the threshold of Gabriel's room, watching him sleep with his arms outstretched like wings. She whispered, You came early so I could rise sooner. Her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. Team dinner tomorrow, just us this time. She smiled and typed back, I'll bring dessert. Setting the phone aside, she opened her journal and wrote the final entry on a fresh page. I am no longer angry. I am no longer afraid. I'm no longer waiting. I have arrived. Closing the book, she looked around her home, not a palace, not a monument, but a place where strength lived quietly. And with a heart that no longer chased validation, Mary Daniels stood in the center of her own life and exhaled. She had not just survived, she had soared. Here's the Bible verse, Isaiah 61, verse 3. To bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. Why this verse? Mary's life was reduced to ashes through betrayal, mockery, and manipulation. But through resilience, wisdom, and grace, God restored her identity. The verse affirms that transformation is not only possible, it becomes a testimony. Moral of the story: a woman's worth is not defined by the hands that tried to silence her, but by the strength she chooses to rise with. Silence in pain is not weakness. Sometimes it's the gathering of thunder. And when she finally speaks, she rewrites the story. Key lessons. Empowerment often begins in silence. Mary didn't shout her pain. She built her strength quietly, allowing her actions to speak where words had failed. Motherhood is not a limitation, it's a legacy. Her love for Gabriel fueled every brave decision and ignited her purpose. Redemption does not always require reconciliation. Forgiveness can be given without restoring what was broken. The right support matters. True friends and wise allies like Isabel, Rebecca, and Daniel can become the scaffolding for a new life. Leadership is born in the fire of failure and endurance. Mary didn't become a CEO in spite of her pain. She became one because she turned it into power. That's the end of the story. What did you learn from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments section. Leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notification so that you'll be notified whenever we drop our next videos. Also, share this video to someone who might be interested. Thank you so much for watching.